Hi everyone, thank you for coming. I hope you've been enjoying it so far. What I want to talk about is how games have made us obsessed with ourselves. I think that everyone here is a good listener, you know, a humble individual and open to other ideas and conversations with friends and whomever. But video games encourage the opposite. Video games encourage us to be selfish and to be insular and to care about getting what we want. And it's created this kind of feedback loop where I think that game makers have kind of taken it upon themselves and decided that their kind of God-given task is to please us, is for games to pander to what we want and to be encouraging and pleasing and to kind of stop us from asking questions of ourselves and to not push us too hard and to kind of invade our consciousness and our ideas of who we are and what the world is. And it's reached this really perverse extreme where even games that are ostensibly about difficult and painful subject matter, games that are about, say, grief or depression or loss or heartbreak, are packaged and marketed in a way that makes those themes and that subject matter appealing to us. There's this disgusting internet meme where people talk about, oh, it gave me all the feels. And that's like a phrase that just, I think, symbolizes the point to which even the bleakest emotions in games, and also in television and in movies, have become something that we really like, we seek out. We want to feel bad, but because it makes us feel good. There's a kind of smug satisfaction when you reach the end of a game and it makes you cry, because you're like, oh, you know, I'm capable of crying, aren't I a wonderful person? And games pander to that. Games, you know, you have these ridiculous things now, like the emotional game rewards, and you know, the pull quotes on websites are things like, it made me cry, it made me re-question my entire life and whatever. But that's not genuinely challenging. That is just marketing again. That is appealing to us directly. I think the games do this for a multitude of reasons. Firstly, it's a clear financial incentive. If you keep stroking players on the back and telling them that they're the best, you're probably going to sell more games than a game that tells people, you know, that they're wrong about the world, or that they're wrong about themselves, or that, you know, their worldview is limited somehow. I also think it's because, you know, negative subject matter is kind of harder to deal with. It takes a kind of a broader range of experiences than to be pleasant. I think pleasant emotions are quite simplistic sometimes, as opposed to conflicting and difficult ones. The way this manifests in games, you know, just to kind of try and evidence it a little bit, is in like a sandbox game. A sandbox game is ostensibly a huge wide open world full of different people and different ideas and different things you go and do. But as much as it's big, it's actually very small. Like a sandbox is designed around you. You are the center of the universe. You know, sometimes patently you are the center of the universe. You are the hero. You're the one who's going to come and redeem this entire world. But in like small, mechanical, kind of surreptitious ways, you're also the center. You know, you spend hours designing like meticulously the way that you look. You worry about your morality and what you're doing. You know, the quests you choose are for your satisfaction, to get money, to get weapons, to get equipment. It's all about building yourself up, as opposed to sort of shutting up and listening. I think that's the difference between games, you know, by their nature, and theatre and novels and movies, is that in games you're talking, you're constantly speaking over them. You know, you are, by the nature of playing a game, you are impassive, and in doing that, you're kind of overwhelming what the game might be actually trying to tell you. And it's not so much that, you know, that's like a problem. It's just that game makers themselves have kind of stopped trying to change that. They've given up on doing anything but satisfying us. You take a game like Battlefield 1, which came out last month, and Battlefield 1 is a game about the First World War, but the history and the way that the First World War is treated in that game is very sanitized and truncated and made extremely palatable. It's digestible. They glance over it because to kind of confront us with it, you know, to confront us with the idea that, you know, our national ancestors did X, Y, and Z would be deemed kind of too offensive. And the problem with that, of course, is that, you know, you end up losing all of these wonderful things: truth, education, perspective, you know, that you should be getting from something like games. After so many years, you know, this argument that games are young is completely fatuous now. It's been 40, almost 50 years, you know, grow the fuck up. And they're still talked about as if they're like a maturing medium. It's time to start confronting people with like painful realities of their lives. Because if you don't, you end up basically giving ammunition to awful and, just backward. I'm reticent to use the word movement because I don't think they're that organised. But Gamergate, the ammunition that they have, the reason that they exist, the way that the reason that they're so inflamed is because they've been told, like we all have for so long by video games, that what they want matters more than what the game maker wants. What they want to do in the game is more important than, I don't like the word, but the message of the game, the literature of the game comes second. And that creates this awful mindset where people like the followers of Gamergate think that they can rally and rail and demand and put limits on game makers and get what they want. You remember like Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 3, they changed the ending because people complained. I mean, that's ridiculous. Imagine like if a novel came out and it had a bad ending and they re-released it with a different ending. I'm sure that has happened at some point, but it was probably equally distasteful then. I think it's like a really sick precedent that games have got to, where they're treated not just by the people that buy them now, but by the people that make them as consumer goods, as products. The words that we use, developer, designer, content, and product is often used quite a lot. Makes games sound like a telephone or a hairdryer or something. And we want them to have all these kind of functional and domestic features that will do its job. It will do what it says on the box, which is a terrible way to look at something that you might one day like to call art. Some examples of the contrary, some examples of games where you kind of come second. Has anyone played Actual Sunlight by Will O'Neill? One person. Okay, well do. It's on the PlayStation Vita, you can get it on the PC, it's very cheap. And that's a game about depression and about loss and about kind of inertia and middle-age kind of misery. But it's uncompromising. It doesn't care what you think about those things going in. It doesn't care about how you feel. It also doesn't care about you as a person. It's about this character. It's about this man's experiences. And it's kind of limited in the way that you interact with it because it wants you to just shut up and listen. Not because it's patronising, but because it's optimistic. It thinks it's got something to tell you, and it has. It wants the best for you. It wants you to learn. It wants to be educational. Kane and Lynch 2 is that's a game that is... Yeah. That's a game that is as interactive and as violent and as kind of superficially vulgar as any shooter that you care to name. But again, it goes against what you want. It backfoots you. It really cares more about itself, and the writers of it care more about what they have to say than your experience of it. And I think that's the mindset, the kind of tectonic change that needs to happen in the way that games are talked about and thought about and why they're made and why they're purchased. Instead of going out and getting something that's going to tick boxes and scratch an itch, you go out and get something because you want to hear what this person has to say. You read an editorial in a newspaper because you're interested in the words of this person. You go to see a play because it's directed by someone who their work, you care for it. And there's an element of that in games, but it's still sort of knotted and twisted in this, I'm buying this because the last time I bought a game by these people, it satisfied what I wanted from them, as opposed to it changed something in me. I worry that some of this sounds like extreme generalization, but again, I'd revert you back to just the myriad ways that games pander to us, the amount of times that you hear, you are the hero. You can go anywhere you want. That's something that I can't stand to hear these days. It's 2016. I'm fed up with being told you can go where you want and do what you want, and the narrative is up to you and the experience is up to you. Like, I don't care about me. I want to stop being treated like a recalcitrant child who has to have his ice cream at 4 o'clock or else he throws a tantrum. I want to be told because the joy of stories and of literature since time began is to sit around the fire and listen to somebody else speak to you and to be quiet. And games do the opposite of that. They encourage you to keep talking. So if you remove that, it does beg the question, what do games look like if they're not speaking directly to the player? What is a game if it's not an experience designed around a player? I think the fact of the matter is I don't know. Often when I go off on rants like this, as I tend to do at weddings and funerals and things, people say, well, what do you want of games? What do you want from games? If this is your opinion, what would you have games do? And the only answer I can think of is I want to be stopped being asked that question. I don't want games to care about what I want. I don't want the industry to care about what I want. I certainly don't want these little messages that appear at the start of AAA games now saying, oh, a big thank you from the team for buying this. We worked really, really hard. Like, just calm down. We're not going to judge you. We're not. I'd like to think anyway that as we've all got older and we've all got older playing games, that we're not going to spit our dummies out anymore just because games don't scratch our backs the way that they used to. When Tomb Raider ends with that kind of sycophantic, huge heartfelt thank you to everyone who's stuck by the community for all these years, it makes you want to be sick. So I think that, in summary, the title I had of this talk, because I'm, always in a rush to quote rap culture, was don't hate the game, hate the player. And I think that we need to kind of start to regard the player not as this kind of Persian god king, to whom we must submit and give the game to, but to try and think of the player as firstly, I think, as a slightly selfish and almost like psychopathic presence, but also as someone who wants to listen. I think that we're all grown-ups now. I think that we all read books. I think that we all enjoy good movies. And I think that we actually are all fulfilled and invigorated and excited, and we find it fun. I don't think it's any less enjoyable to sit and listen than it is to speak and to do what you want. I think that we all like to hear a story, and that games, shouldn't be afraid to embrace that. I think that we're adults, and we don't need, this huge sandbox where you can go and drive a car into a bar, or, where you can dress yourself up for 6 hours or whatever. So that's about it for me. But, I hope you enjoyed that and it wasn't too downbeat or anything.